What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Tricky J. I'm going to be going over some rule changes, an updated ban list to the upcoming expanded format starting August 17th, 2018. We've got 4 new cards added to the ban list, joining the likes of Forest of Giant Plants and Archeops in expanded format. Getsis, Hex Maniac, Puzzle of Time, and Wally. All 4 cards, huge, impactful cards in expanded format, all going to be taking a permanent backseat until further notice, which is absolutely insane. That means that we've only got a month left to legally play Puzzle of Time before it is just banished forever and never to be played again. Crazy card. The card has been influential this year in standard format in Zoroark decks, but has also just made a huge splash in expanded format as well. I'm going to go through each of these cards in detail, talk about what decks are affected by this, and how I think this ban list will shape the upcoming expanded format metagame. Now, a common theme that I feel like is being represented in this ban list is just the one-sided effects on the field on a player that are being nerfed with this. One-sided item lock, extremely good. One-sided ability lock, extremely good. They should be difficult to get into play, in my opinion. One of the biggest problems I've had with expanded format for the past couple of years is that I felt like the one-sidedness was way too rampant. Things like Archeops for a long time made it so that you could stop Pokemon from evolving, right? Whenever one player decided to, and it was very easy to get out, right? You could get it out on the first turn of the game with Maxie's hidden ball trick. That was eventually banned, which I thought was a good combination to ban in expanded format. But now we got Getsis, Hex Maniac, Puzzle of Time, and Wally all being banned as well. And if we look at them, they are all very closely linked to one-sided effects on the field. Getsis, one-sided item disruption is a big deal. Now, Getsis reminds me a lot of Last from back in the day, which was a trainer card, but it was balanced because in a way you had to strip both players of all the items in their hand. I mean, nowadays it would not be balanced because you could just set up a card that drew you cards, a Pokemon that drew you cards, then play Last, so on and so forth. But Getsis is very unbalanced in that a player can play it on the first turn of the game. So playing a Getsis on the first turn of the game means that you can get your opponent's Ultra Balls, Versus Seekers, Battle Compressors, Acro Bikes, anything like that, stripped from their hands so that their draw options are limited. With cards like Tapu Lele in format, a lot of draw support relies on starting with the turn 1 Ultra Ball or something like that to go fetch a supporter for consistency in the deck. If you have to worry about getting Getsis on the first turn of the game, that essentially takes 4 of those draw outs, those 4 Ultra Balls, out of your arsenal, right? If you could play Getsis on the first turn of the game. Also, Getsis is extremely powerful in Zoroark decks, since Zoroark could afford to just Getsis and strip you of all your items, then continue just drawing cards. One of the major drawbacks of Getsis is that you usually don't get to draw too many cards with Getsis. You shuffle as many item cards as your opponent has in their hand back into their deck with the effect of the supporter, then draw that many cards. Usually you're only netting a draw of 2, maybe 3, but with Zoroark you get to trade, Getsis, trade, which is insane, right? You could just trade as many times as you can, draw maybe 10 cards in a turn, while also playing Getsis was extremely overpowered. So I'm happy to see Getsis go. I think that it is just way too one-sided, a little degenerate. I don't think it actually does anything good for the game. I am all about trying to make it so that there are enough disruption cards in the game. I think it's bad when you have a game that hand disruption does not exist. However, the one-sidedness of Getsis really turned me off, and I'm happy to see it go. Up next, we have Hex Maniac. Hex Maniac has been an absolute staple in almost every single archetype just since this card has been legal. It's insane. Alongside Versus Seeker means that you could just pull up a one-sided ability lock whenever you want. Hex Maniac has quite literally shaped the format. If your deck cannot deal with Hex Maniac back-to-back turns, then it's not going to be viable in expanded format. So Hex Maniac, huge deal in combination with Zoroark. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. One-sided ability lock, right? Zoroark was able to just trade, draw as many cards as it want, then Verse Seeker, Hex Maniac, play that one-sided ability lock, and then the turn comes back to Zoroark, and the ball is back in their court. With cards like Versus Seeker and Puzzle of Time, they could trade, and then Hex Maniac again before they use the Riotous Beating attack. It was just an absolutely insane mechanic. I mean, cards like Pseudo Wudo that are supposed to limit the bench, Zoroark could even play around that with Hex Maniac. Hex Maniac made it so decks like Zoroark and Mega Rayquaza could just both take big one-hit KOs while also ability locking the opponent, making it so that there was almost no way that they would be able to summon a response KO to this, huge attacker that just attacked. It just was incredibly unbalanced, especially things like Hex Maniac on the first turn of the game. As I said with Ghetsis, it's very easy with cards like Jirachi EX, Tapu Lele GX, Shaman EX to draw into the cards that you need in order to perform a turn 1 Hex Maniac. Now, a turn 1 Hex Maniac going first can oftentimes just leave your opponent completely shut down. A lot of Zoroark decks will go for Lele turn 1 Bridget, right? A lot of decks are looking for the turn 1 Bridget in order to get their strategy set up. Using Tapu Lele to fetch that Bridget is a very common strategy. Now, I don't think Pokemon wants to necessarily stop decks from setting up. That generally is bad for the game if an opponent is able to make it so that their other opponent is not able to set up their deck starting from turn 1 when they're not even getting a chance to play any cards. So I think that one of the common themes here as well is that they are banning cards that stop your opponent from getting to play the game. That's why they banned Shiftry at first, right? Because Shiftry could remove all your opponent's Pokemon from play before they got to play a turn. That was deemed, unfair, so they banned it. Force of Giant Plants made it so that you could get Violet Plume out on the first turn of the game before your opponent gets to play any cards. Turn 1 item lock where your opponent doesn't get to play any cards, extremely unfair, so they banned that from the game. Force of Giant Plants is now gone. Ghetsis, having your item stripped from your hand before you get to play a turn of the game, unfair, so they banned Ghetsis. Now, Hex Maniac, one-sided ability lock whenever you want. I think that's extremely unfair, and I think that banning Hex Maniac in expanded format will really open up the format. Lots of ability decks are going to come out of the woodwork here. We're going to see things like Archie's Blastoise come back to the forefront, a deck that is very ability reliant, that could not deal with its Pokemon getting knocked out and then not having abilities to make a response knockout. Even cards like Electric and Malamar are both really going to benefit from having their abilities. Volcanion as well. Lots of decks that rely very heavily on abilities in order to sustain their damage output, abilities in order to sustain their energy acceleration are going to get a huge boon from Hex Maniac being banned. And I, for one, very excited to see these ability reliant decks kind of come back into expanded format, though I do think that potentially Parallel City still a really intense card in expanded format. It's going to be very good still. I think Parallel City does still do a number on ability decks, just limiting their bench to 3. A lot of these ability setup decks want a huge bench, and unfortunately Parallel City I think is going to remain extremely popular in expanded format, still putting quite the check on a lot of these ability reliant decks in expanded format. But I'm excited about the direction here. I think it's headed in a great space, and I think that expanded is going to get much more fun with this updated ban list. Up next, we've got Puzzle of Time. I cannot believe that this is the last month to play Puzzle of Time, and then it is gone forever. Puzzle of Time, when first released, was seen as Night March's answer to the special energy conundrum. The fact that you could not play more than 4 double colorless energy. With Puzzle of Time, you could very easily get your DCEs back from the discard pile. It's going to be a big deal with Puzzle of Time gone in standard format because we are also losing special charge, meaning that the special energy conundrum is coming back in standard format. But I think that's all in all very good for the game, making it so that you have to craft a deck that can utilize its resources effectively. You can't get away with only playing 4 energy or maybe 7 energy, right? You're going to need more energy than that unless you're taking one-hit KOs with each of those DCE, as Night March very well used to do. So Puzzle of Time getting banned in expanded format means that, again, Zoroark taking a huge hit. Zoroark loved being able to trade into puzzles and then reuse whatever resources it wanted at any point in the game. It made Zoroark one of the most broken control decks of all time, with Versus Seeker and Puzzle of Time at its disposal. Now, Zoroark, I think, will still be good, but it only has Versus Seeker to retrieve whatever supporter it wants from the discard pile. In expanded format, you can still play things like Special Charge in order to get your DCE back. I think that Zoroark will stay very good, being able to utilize one of supporters very effectively by trading into Versus Seeker. However, I think Puzzle of Time was just way too broken of a combination to exist with Zoroark, and I think a lot of players saw that, especially with Riley's very dominant regional run. That deck was completely ridiculous, being able to pull back things like Red Card, limit your opponent, and Hex Maniac all in the same turn and take one-hit KOs, right? With Zoroark's Riotous Beating was way too powerful. He could do way too much stuff in one turn with that deck, and I think that Puzzle of Time makes it so that some of those broken combinations are going to be gone. I mean, even things like Counter Catcher, right? Being able to pull back a Counter Catcher whenever you want is ridiculous. Being able to pull back an Enhanced Hammer whenever you want is ridiculous, especially when you can draw seemingly infinite cards with trade. So I'm happy to see Puzzle of Time go. I think Zoroark will stay good. It's just going to be a little bit more of a fair game with Zoroark. They will have a large arsenal of supporters at their disposal to be able to reuse with Versus Seeker, like I said, but they'll have to utilize things like Rescue Stretcher and Special Charge in order to reuse their energy and get their Pokemon back from the discard pile. And I'm definitely interested to see what ways Zoroark decks continue to evolve with the upkeeping of expanded format. Now, the final card on our list here is Wally. Wally is getting banned, and it's funny that Wally gets banned here, but it's clearly banned because of Trevenant. I mean, Trevenant Break, the one-sided item lock. I'd said that a lot of the ban theme here is the one-sidedness, right? One-sided ability lock, one-sided item lock, one-sided item disruption. One-sided item lock is way good. It was the source of their most recent ban, Forest of Giant Plants, was the one-sided Vileplume item lock was way too good. Also, they released a Grass Phantom, right? So the Grass Phantom was going to be able to evolve into a turn 1 Trevenant way too easily. So they were like, yeah, get that stadium out of here. It's going to be ridiculous out here. Now that they're banning Wally, they're kind of taking a hard stance against Trevenant Break, saying the turn 1 item lock is too strong. We really shouldn't have that in our format, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think Trevenant stays good, however, you just will Ascension. You still have Dimension Validity. You can still get a turn 1 Ascension going second with your Phantom, which makes for a turn 2, a consistent turn 2 item lock, which I think most players would probably agree is much more fair. And Trevenant can still function with a turn 2 item lock. It's just much more of a reasonable game when it's turn 2 instead of turn 1. A lot of Trevenant decks were building for the turn 1 item lock, and it just was really degenerate in my opinion, and I don't really think that it was healthy for the state of the game, so I'm happy to see Wally go. Wally wasn't really seeing a lot of play in any other decks, so it's nice for some of these very one-sided, very kind of suppressing decks for the format take a little bit of a hit with this updated ban list. I think that Buzzwole gets really strong in expanded format with Zoroark taking such a big hit, with Trevenant taking a hit as well. I think this is all good news for Buzzwole, which is already a pretty big powerhouse in expanded format. I think other ability reliant decks, as I had said, will also get a huge plus as well. Like Gardevoir GX is going to love this. We've got Blastoise. Archie's Blastoise is definitely going to love this. Both energy accelerators from the discard pile, electric and Malamar are both going to love this as well. And I think that it is all in all very good and very healthy for expanded format, and I'm happy and excited to see where expanded format goes from here. So anyways, let me know, what do you guys think of the updated ban list in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel, ring that bell, check out the Etsy store and the Patreon stuff in the description below. Peace.